So these are the Cunninghams, and we're going to be talking about the Cunninghams. Now, are you a big fan of Cunninghams?
As an American race car, as part of American racing history, absolutely. And Briggs Cunningham, as I said, was your prototypical sportsman. He won the America's Cup in sailing, and then decided to go into auto racing, and decided to build his own car. Now, we were talking about the Oldsmobile Rockets and the Cadillacs and the small block Chevys, and also the Chrysler Hemis that were coming out in the early 1950s. The American engines were really the cutting edge of technology. They were better than most of what the Europeans were offering, but the Americans didn't do sports cars. So what he decided to do is to build his own sports racing car with Chrysler power.
How you doing?
Good. I'm Tom Cotter.
I'm Michael Artsis. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
This is Matt. We're coming over.
Hi, how are you?
These folks through the lens are the Terrifics. You want to say hello?
I never met anybody that called themselves Terrific. Is that their real God-given name?
That is their God-given name. They're the Terrifics. They are our wonderful audience that watches, that supports, that gets excited, that is ready to hear everything about Cunninghams from you.
Let me tell you why this is a special day. These cars are American cars. The largest grouping of Cunninghams in history was 5 years ago at Lime Rock Park, Connecticut, and we had 13 Cunninghams together. In history, there's never been 13 Cunninghams together. And here, this weekend, we have 33 Cunninghams. Of the 35 that are on Earth, 33 are here. Just amazing. So, here's the deal. Briggs Cunningham grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, spent most of his life right here in Connecticut, just a few miles east of here in Greens Farms. He wanted to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans with American cars and American drivers. To race at Le Mans, you had to, with your own car, you had to build street cars. You had to be like Aston Martin, Jaguar, Ferrari. You had to build cars that people could buy and drive on the street. Then you could race. So this is the first car he built. It's the only one that's Cadillac powered. He had a program with Cadillac to get engines, but eventually that program went away. Cadillac said, "Why do we need to show how good our engines are in racing? We build luxury cars." So then he started to go to Hemis. So this is a C2R. Now let me explain what this is. C means Cunningham, 2 means it's the second generation, and R means a race car. That's the C1, the C2R. These C2Rs, there were 3 built, 2 exist. One was totaled at Pebble Beach in the 50s. So these are the first Hemi-powered race cars. The next generation of racing car was the C4R. And this is the stereotypical Cunningham that you see in books and posters and toys and whatever. The C4R is the classic Cunningham shape, look. Still had the same Hemi engine, about 300 horsepower in the souped up form. These were made in West Palm Beach, Florida. You can see right here, West Palm Beach, Florida. The issue became, they said, you have to build street cars. So he had to start building street cars. We're going to get there in a moment. But he had to build a C3, which was not a C3R. R was a race car, just a C3. He had to be a manufacturer. He built 25 street cars because that's what Le Mans organizers required. And all 25 are here today. It's amazing. None have been lost in time. But, okay, so they built 2 C4Rs. This is one of them, which is based at the Collier Museum in Florida. And this is the other C4R, which is based at Fred Simeone's collection in Philadelphia. They built 2 of those. C5R was probably the most successful Cunningham. It finished 3rd at Le Mans, which is the highest he ever finished. He had big cars, big engines, 750-pound motors, and he had drum brakes. He didn't have the equipment that, say, Jaguar had to win. So he did the best he could. He finished 3rd. And the last race car is a C6. This is the 6th generation race car, and it's styled much like a Jaguar D-Type. It never really accomplished what he hoped it would. It got so expensive, the IRS said it's not really a business, it's a hobby, and he closed down his shop and started to race other cars, Jaguars, Maseratis, Corvettes. But this is the first Cunningham C3, and these are in chronological order. This is 5206. And that's 5207. That's my car, by the way. That's my rat rod. You can see we parked it purposely next to a Ferrari that was designed by the same designer, built in the same factory, Vignali. But this Ferrari is 5/8 the size of this Cunningham, because Ferrari had a really small 12-cylinder engine and Cunningham had a huge V8. But they were made at the same time. I just wanted to show you how close they are to a Ferrari. So here we have a lineup of 25 C3s. He built 25 cars total, 20 coupes, and 5 convertibles. They were all powered by Chrysler Hemi engines, 331 cubic inches with 4 single-barrel carburetors. The first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, have 3-speed Cadillac transmissions. But after that, the 5th one on, they had fluid drive Chrysler transmissions, which Briggs never really wanted, but nobody had invented a 4-speed Muncie box by then. It was just, he just had to get cars out there, so he was able and legal to race at Le Mans. This is interesting contrast in I guess, condition. This car's been fully restored and it's beautiful. And my car I found in a barn in South Carolina, and it's just the way I found it. It runs well. I restored it mechanically.
Can you start it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is Briggs Cunningham coat when he went to Yale in 1926. This was his college coat.
Yeah, that's a raccoon coat, isn't it?
Yep.
Bula Bula.
His name is in there.
Well, first of all, there's a little sticker on the back that says, yeah, it's got a Hemi. Chrysler introduced the Hemi engine in 1951, and they played in kind of very nicely into what they were doing, because the cars that they were making were kind of stodgy. So Cunningham comes in and asks them for a few copies of this Chrysler Firepower, the hemispherical head V8. Okay, here we go. Start her up. Now imagine your Chrysler Windsor with that kind of sound.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat car.
But that's what Chrysler was packing in their cars back in the day, but they didn't have a sports car.
This was the most expensive American car in the day. In 1952, you could buy 3 Cadillacs for the price of one of these. So people like Nelson Rockefeller bought cars like this.
Now, my next question is, he started out with Cadillac because he actually ran a couple of Cadillacs at Le Mans before building his own car. He ran a stock Cadillac, and he ran a custom body Cadillac they called Le Monstre. And that's how he developed a relationship with Cadillac. But then Cadillac, I guess, as you said, distanced themselves from him, but Chrysler seemed to be there for the taking.
Oh, yeah, he was lucky enough to have been a college roommate to a vice president of Chrysler Corporation's son. You see the intake manifold says Cunningham, West Palm Beach, Florida. You couldn't buy a 4-barrel carburetor in 1952. You had to make your own 4-barrel. So it's got 4 1-barrel Zeniths on it. You couldn't buy a 4-speed gearbox. It's got a 3-speed gearbox. You couldn't find a Hurst shifter. Nobody built anything like that. So the shifter on this thing is made out of a 51 Ford column shift mounted to the floor. You know, he had it much tougher than Carroll Shelby. Carroll Shelby would go to the store and buy stuff. Briggs Cunningham had to make it.
But if not for Briggs Cunningham, there might not have been a Carroll Shelby.
Right. So the way that car and this car are different than the rest of those cars. We went on a 100-mile tour on Friday, and you could tell why they made these changes. This is the third one built, and it's got vent windows, and it's got a cowl vent. You can open it up and get breathing in underneath the dash. No vent windows, no cowl vent. So these cars are really, really hot inside. But this car won its class at 1952 at the Watkins Glen Concours d'Elegance and at Elkhart Lake at the Concours d'Elegance. This was quite a pretty car at one time. It was cream on the top. It was this color green here and a lighter color green here. So it was a 3-tone car.
What are your future plans for it?
You know, I don't know. I just have so much fun with the way it is. I don't know if I have any future plans. I might just
Keep
leave
it as
the way
a survivor?
Yeah. I rebuilt it mechanically, but see, most of them were three-tones. The car loaned itself to a three-tone paint job.
But also, I mean, these are all Vignale bodies. So how did they go about, because obviously the bodies are made in Italy. So I guess they were made over there, shipped over here, and then they put the cars back together in West Palm Beach?
The West Palm Beach, they built the chassis. They finished the chassis. They were running engines. They put them on a boat, shipped them to Torino, put the body on, and brought them back here and sold them. Let's walk down the lineup here. So you can see, look at the different kind of wheels. The standard wheel was this, and with a hubcap.
So it's just, I would bet any amount of money it's a standard Chrysler wheel.
Yes, standard Chrysler wheel. An optional wheel was a Halobrand. And you could buy them either as a Halobrand 5-bolt or a Halobrand knockoff. Then you had Barani wire wheels, which were an option.
Which, of course, Italian manufacturer,
right,
and used on Ferraris.
Yep. Now remember, this is a half Italian car. I mean, this is really a hybrid. It's half Italian and half American. So that's why these cars are on display today and tomorrow.
Another Survivor here.
Yep, another Survivor. Let me walk over here. How you doing?
I can tell that the components under the hood they look kind of fresh just by looking through the wheel well here. But this looks like a restoration project in progress.
Yeah, it is. This car was found, it was left for 30 years outdoors in eastern Connecticut near the Long Island Sound, and it rusted so badly the front cross member rotted and the wheels were splayed out. These are from, what do you call them? Like little animals crawling, insects crawling around there. It was so cool, we didn't want to move them, but it's snails.
Yeah.
And so this car, little by little, is becoming mechanically refurbished. One day it'll be beautiful like the rest.
But then you get this.
Yeah, this is the way they looked when they came. You know, fitted luggage in the back, hubcaps, automatic on a column.
Being essentially a series of one-off cars, you can get these any color you wanted, any interior you wanted, I'm sure, and the fitted luggage was an option, I'm sure, as well. And all this is done almost one-off in and of itself. And no two of these is alike.
No, none alike. You could buy racing wheels, you could buy racing tires, all as options. You could buy, there's one over 2 cars over, it's got a supercharger, a McCullough supercharger.
This one's got chrome hubcaps on.
Most of them did. Most of them, unless you paid for wire wheels or Halobrands, that's what they had. It has a different kind of wire wheel. But this one over here, it was modified just when it was a couple of years old. That's a McCullough supercharger blowing through a carburetor.
Right.
It's got a 4-speed Muncie. So this thing was modified a couple of years after Cunninghams were built. And, you know, they were just a hot rod.
Correct. I mean, this is what, Studebaker was using these. And so were a bunch of, Ford had them, and a couple of supercharged Fords over there. So same basic idea applied to the Chrysler engine, but the box is custom made, obviously. That's fabricated.
Right. That was built by Bill Frick in Freeport on Long Island.
How much extra power do they know they got out of it?
I don't know. This car has been frantically being restored for 18 months. It was finished last week.
Okay, now the Halobrand wheel we have not shown anybody. If we can get a camera on the wheels, on any of the wheels on this car. Okay, Halobrand was one of the early manufacturers of cast aluminum wheels. And they were a staple on race cars from the 50s well into the 60s. And that particular style was also copied on many aluminum wheels that you see on cars.
It's called a kidney bean.
Yeah.
Kidney bean wheel. Yeah.
Now, when they say knockoff, notice this. The little thing here in the center. The way you took the wheel on and off was you had a rubber mallet and you knocked it off and then knocked it back on. That's why they called them knockoff.
Tom, they're saying they look British and they remind them a little bit of maybe an Austin Healey. And they maybe have a little bit of an Aston Martin look. Anything about the design, and was that purposeful, or is that something that kind of several cars were looking like back then?
Well, if you look at the Ferrari we started out at over there and this, they were designed by Giovanni Michelotti, who was an Italian designer. And so he just took the same design as the Ferrari and adapted to Cunningham or vice versa. Certainly there's more Cunninghams than there are Ferraris. There's only 3 of those and there's 25 of these. And then they were made by the same body company in Torino, Italy, Vignale. I don't think they look English, but I brought my car last year to the SEMA show. It was the king of the SEMA show, and people thought it was a Volvo 122.
Well, guys, I will answer the Michelotti question, because Michelotti designed a lot of the Triumphs. The TR4,
Well, so
5, and 6.
there's
were
the
Michelotti
somebody else says
designs.
there's an MG influence here, and I see all of it.
Yeah.
I see all
Or
of
influence
every.
on MG, I should
Yeah.
say. They came later.
I was going to say though, there seems like I could see all these influences going back and forth around that time period. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, and I think it was an interesting point.
But you
yeah.
also see how a lot of these designs intermingled. There was a lot of interaction because these companies went to the same people. Anything Pininfarina put out, there's some relationship to them. I mean, I remember an article, it was in Automobile Quarterly, one of these, that they would point out how alike, let's say, a Fiat 1100 and a Peugeot 404 looked, because they're both Pininfarina designs.
Now this silver one right here, this finished. It competed in the concours at Pebble Beach. It finished second in the Concours d'Elegance there, which for Cunningham is the highest one's ever finished. The one next to it belongs to Chuck Schoendorf. This is the only Cunningham we know of that was raced when it was new. A guy bought this car in South America and raced it in Argentina, Brazil. There was road racing through the mountains there, and this was the race car. So
Turismo Carretera.
yeah,
TC.
So this is the only one we know of that raced, but this was a street car, but a couple of them raced.
Interesting touch, the belts on the hood to keep it from flying up.
$10 option. Seriously, I have the price sheet.
Wow.
All right, so this is an interesting story. You saw my car, the Rat Rod. That was owned by a Presbyterian minister back in the late 50s, early 60s.
How could he afford one?
Well, came from a wealthy family.
Very
so
good.
he left it off at a repair shop and didn't go back to pick it up. So he lost it in a garage lien. The guy said, "Well, wait a minute. It's been here for 2 years. It's my car now."
Yeah.
So he went out and bought another one. So this Presbyterian minister owned 2 Cunninghams, and this is the other one he owned. So I have a picture of these 2 side by side in my driveway. And then I made a phone call to a buddy of mine, and they said, I got a Cunningham here. The guy who owns it wants to sell it. Are you interested? And he wanted to buy it. So this one belongs to Jay Leno. And if you watch Jay Leno's garage, they show this car under restoration over the course of the series. So he's done a great job with it. It's slightly modified.
Well, one modification I can see right now is on the Hallenbrand wheels. Those knockoffs are a little different from standard.
Yeah.
But Jay likes to do that.
And what he did, and I can't say I blame him for it, these engines weigh 750 pounds.
Yes.
But you can put aluminum heads on, aluminum bell housing, aluminum water pump, and take about 400 pounds off the thing. So he did that, and so it's a nice lighter car to drive.
Well, I'm sure those parts were available at the time because drag racers had them.
Yeah, not in 52 they were.
Not in 52, they were maybe a little bit later.
A little bit later, yeah. So again, different wheel treatment, but all great cars. Here's another one. This is the way they would have looked if you bought it new. Hubcaps, automatic shifter. Actually, he put the shifter on the floor. But this is the way they would have looked new. Just plain and luxury. Quiet, smooth.
This was a quintessential Grand Touring car. The difference between a sports car and a Grand Touring car for the Terrifics is that a sports car is not meant to be driven appreciable distances. A little bit edgier, a little bit rougher riding, more cramped. A Grand Touring car, on the other hand, is meant to get you someplace in a hurry. And when you had unlimited speed roads all over Europe, these were the kind of cars you drove if you wanted to get someplace.
Yeah. Now this is an interesting car. This car, until recently, was in the Cunningham family. Briggs kept this car, and it sat for a warehouse for a long time. Sat in a warehouse.
2018.
His family used it.
Greenwich Concours d'Elegance.
Mostly just sat. And I would go up to take the train out of New York to Lucy Cunningham's house in Greens Farm and take her for rides in this car. When she passed away, this was sold, and it's in private hands now. This lady owns it. She and her husband own it. It's a great car. It's a great car. But this was in their family for 50 plus years.
That's amazing, too.
That's never happened before because no show has ever had.
But again, I'll repeat myself, no two alike. We're going all the way up and down. We're looking at just about every Cunningham ever built, save for a couple, and one was destroyed back in the 1950s. And have you seen any? You can't find any two that even the same color scheme.
Oh no, there's no such thing. This belongs to Miles Collier, and it lives at the Revs Institute in Naples, Florida. And they use this on tours, the Colorado Grand, the California Melee, all these kind of tours. They drive the wheels off this thing. So they sent this car up plus 4 race cars to this show. So they sent 5 cars up here.
Wow. Well, you know, I find interesting about this car in particular, the classic Michelin radials.
Yeah.
Very early Michelin tires. Michelin developed the radial tire or put it in mass production right after World War II. And if you wanted a great Grand Touring tire, that was what you bought.
Yeah.
Very expensive in its time, but that was it.
This is one of my favorites. This is the first convertible build. So they built 20 coupes and 5 convertibles. And all 5 convertibles are here, and all 20 coupes are here. This is interesting. When this car was new, this was $9,000 bucks, 1952. Now, my parents bought their first house in '56 for $7,000. This was $9,000 in 1952.
And Rolls went for 12.
Probably. It was $9,000 for the coupe and $8,000 for the convertible. It's like, convertible was less expensive than a coupe. Yeah, it was, because you could stitch up fabric quicker and cheaper than you could bang up an aluminum top for a car like this, handmade. So $9,000 and $8,000. You could buy 3 Cadillacs for the price of one of these cars, the most expensive American car.
Now, I've noticed over the course of the run, now, are let's say these caps, well, this is a different type of wire wheel.
That's a Chrysler wire wheel. So they had Chrysler bolt pattern. So a lot of people put the Chrysler Imperial wheels on here.
Very good.
Yeah, bolt right on. They look great. Underneath that cap is 5 bolts.
Outside of the engine and, as we just said, the wheels, how much of this car was Chrysler in terms of componentry?
My car has all Chrysler suspension, rear end, front end, and brakes. But most of these cars have a combination of Chrysler and Mercury, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. They were always struggling with brakes. Disc brakes hadn't been invented.
Yeah.
If they had
Jag
been,
was
he would have won Le Mans if he had disc brakes.
Jag did, and they did.
Right. So
those years too.
So, but most of the cars have my car was still a prototype. Most of the cars have a combination of Mercury and Chrysler.
But that's also very interesting. First of all, 2 completely dissimilar manufacturers, but
right.
At the time, Ford and Mercury were, you had the shoebox Fords and the 49 Mercuries, so that componentry was common to a lot of hot rods.
This is the second convertible built. We saw the first one over there. This is owned by the Elliott Museum in Florida, and they were kind enough to bring this car up from Florida, out of the museum, to display for us, because they realize that they're curators of tradition, and this will be the last time anything like this ever happens again.
And this is pretty spectacular. How long did it take to put this together?
A year.
Wow.
A year.
Who came up with the idea?
Well, Chuck, the guy with the white shirt over there, he and I.
Well, it's a great idea. How'd you come up with it?
I don't know.
Yeah.
We had 13 together at Lime Rock 5 years ago, and maybe we can one day blow that out of the water. Well, this is it. We're retiring at this point. No more Cunningham.
Very cool.
Nothing you want to point out, silver leather interior.
That's pretty impressive. I think we're going to take a look at a couple of cars real quick. And I really appreciate it, Tom. Thank you so much. And then we're going to come back for the startup, and that's 2:30. So that's about 12 minutes we've got.
All right. Well, you guys have been terrific.